I'm regularly asked in interviews, Cindy, did you encounter sexism in the ad industry climbing the ranks? And my response was always, a fish does not know what water is, because that was just the way it was. And
Yes,
so I
true.
absolutely loved GGT. And, it was a very competitive environment. There was absolutely about bringing out the best you could be. And I'm all about that. Challenging environments demand that you are the best you can be. And my bosses, my male bosses at GGT, saw potential in me as an account manager that I didn't see in myself. I've been enormously lucky in my advertising career because I worked pretty much most of the time for male bosses, because the ad industry was and continues to be extremely male dominated. But I was lucky enough to work for men who, first of all, did not sexually harass me. I mean, I encountered sexual harassment in the ad industry, but not through the men I worked for, unlike many other women. And so it never got to derail my career the way it did for so many other women. A, they never sexually harassed me, and B, they absolutely believed in my potential, believed in my talents, and championed me, as I say, at a time when, as a junior account manager, junior account director, I didn't even have that much belief in myself. And so both GGT and the environment I then went on to, BBH, operated a culture of excellence, and they were both phenomenal training grounds in which to grow up within your advertising career.
That's fantastic. That is, and they made you see that potential in yourself. How did they do that? And how do you enable other people to see the potential in themselves?
Very simply, by believing in me. When you believe in people, they will rise to that belief.
So actions speak louder than words.
Demonstrate that belief and trust them to rise to it, and they will.
Okay, fantastic. And you said another brilliant nugget before, which was, a fish doesn't know what water is. And you were referring to the sexism, that pervades the advertising industry. Are there other examples that are really important to you of, a fish doesn't know what water is? Other things we take for granted that you think actually we should really stop and think about? You already mentioned children.
The entire patriarchal society we live in.
The
patriarchy.
But that's interesting, because people are talking about that a lot. Do you think we're not talking about it nowhere near enough?
No, people talk about it, but people are not doing, especially men, are not doing enough to break it down. The point I make to men all the time is, and again, I've been saying this for literally decades, men, we live in a world where the default setting is always male. Men, you have no idea how much happier you would be living in a world that was 50-50 equally informed, influenced, designed, led, and managed by both genders.
I can see that. That's very valid.
And by the way, that is why I wrote a few months ago, co-wrote with my friend Thomas Hamora-Primozic, an article for the Harvard Business Review that was titled 7 Leadership Lessons Men Can Learn from Women, which I highly recommend your listeners go and find and read. Because men need female role models just as much as women do. You cannot be what you cannot see applies to men as much as it does to women. And we would all be a lot better off if men had many more female role models to learn from and to want to emulate and be like.
Now that is super interesting, because I have a mentor who's she's female, and we've been friends for years now. And she asked me this question many years ago. She said, who are your role models? Who do you think the people that are really cool? And I listed, like maybe 2 friends, and then like a celebrity or whatever, and they were all male. And she pointed this out to me and went, none of them were female. And that really bothered me. I didn't really have an answer to that. And you're saying it's because, we're not talking about enough. We're not creating.
No. In a patriarchal society, men get the jobs, men get the promotions, men get the leadership positions, men get the government positions, etc., etc., etc. And so there is a massive shortage of female role models, and that's why it's so important men do everything they can to ensure that there are more. And by the way, there are 2 issues. Okay, there is a shortage of great female role models, and there is a massive oversupply of shitty male ones. So the reason I co-wrote my article for the Harvard Business Review with Thomas was because 7 years ago, back in 2013, Thomas wrote a Harvard Business Review article that is the most read Harvard Business Review article of all time. It's called, "Why Do So Many Incompetent Men Become Leaders?" And Thomas's premise in this article is, we focus a lot, quite rightly, on the huge number of barriers faced by brilliant women. But a far bigger problem is the lack of obstacles for incompetent men. And that article was so popular, as I said, the most read Harvard Business Review article of all time, that Thomas turned into a book he published a couple of years ago. The book is also called "Why Do So Many Incompetent Men Become Leaders?" And when you buy the book, you will see that I blurbed it. And I said, this is the single most important business leadership book of our time, because it is. And so men have a plethora of seriously bad male role models and a massive shortage of brilliant female ones, or female ones full stop, by the way. And, you know, what I encourage everyone to do is to flip the gender lens on all of this. Because the patriarchy is the norm, because the default setting is always male, women are constantly, wrongly, encouraged to be more like men, okay? So as women, for example, we are told to change all sorts of things about our behavior and our language. So for example, you know, women are told to stop talking in business contexts in this very female way where we keep apologizing. You know, stop constantly saying sorry. Actually, the answer is not to tell women to say sorry less. The answer is to tell men to say sorry more. We'd all be a whole lot happier in a world where men apologized as frequently as women do.
And this is the kind of radical honesty you're talking about as well, I feel, where, you know, you need to say what's on your mind and people need to embrace things that maybe otherwise they wouldn't have. Are there things that people shouldn't hold back?
But, you know, in a patriarchal society format, there's a huge double standard. You know, women who speak their minds are punished for it. That happens in every single work environment, everywhere, whether it be from a Fortune 500 company boardroom to being a fast food worker at McDonald's. That's the problem. That's why we need you as men to break down the patriarchy for us, because it's not our job to do that.
No, I completely agree. And I guess that's part of the joy of this, that we get to give a platform to, I mean, we don't really get to give it to you. We're lucky enough that you decide to join us. But hopefully we see more things of greater scale that enable that to happen. Is there anything, you know, one particular thing you like, if you could make it happen tomorrow, what would it be?
Two things. I would like men to do two things.
Okay.
They're very simple. They're incredibly easy to do. The first is men listen to women, because you don't. Every day we are man-interrupted, mansplained to, talked over, not listened to, ignored, not heard. So men, if you genuinely want to change the world, if you believe in gender equality, diversity, inclusion, listen to women, consciously stop yourself talking, shut the fuck up in the meeting, in the conversation, start listening. And the second thing you need to do when you start listening is believe women. Because again, you don't. Believe women when we tell you what our experience is. Your experience is not our experience. Believe us when we tell you what our experience is. And when you start doing those two very simple things, listen to women, believe women, what you need to do next to help us will naturally fall out of those two things.
Where do you think that lack of belief comes from?
A patriarchal society.
By definition.
Yeah, by definition. There is a wonderful book written by, let me just remind myself of the exact title. So there's a wonderful book by Jessica Valenti and Jacqueline Friedman called Believe Me, How Trusting Women Can Change the World. And I recommend that everybody listening to this podcast goes and buys that and reads it immediately, especially male listeners.
Brilliant. Well, I'm glad we're getting the words for these confirmed purchases. Do you think men and women are different?
Of course we are.
And what do those differences mean?
Oh, for God's sake, come on, don't be ridiculous. We are two different genders. So of course we're different. But we have grown up, well, the entire world has developed down the centuries in a culture that favors only one gender. And by the way, again, for your listeners, if you want to understand how fully and appallingly that's informed everything about the world we now live in, I recommend a brilliant book by Jack Holland called Misogyny, the World's Oldest Prejudice. Read that and then let it make you want to change that. Because when we live in a gender equal world, gender equal society, honestly, you will not believe how much happier everybody will be.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because I completely agree. And I think sometimes when people, so for example, I studied sociology, and which I greatly enjoy. And people often, when they hear equality, they seem to feel it thinks making people the same. Whereas I feel we don't celebrate difference enough. Like, difference is a wonderful thing that I feel isn't celebrated.
No, absolutely. And the problem we have is that classic, and by the way, the most appallingly insulting response anyone can make when challenged on issues of difference and diversity, which is, oh, diversity is great, but we can't lower the bar. Diversity raises the fucking bar. The bar has been set so low in every single industry when the bar has been defined by white men. We have not even begun to see how high the bar can go in every single industry when the bar is elevated and raised by the welcoming in, the hiring, the promoting, the championing, the celebrating, the rewarding and the paying of the talent, skills and creativity of women, Black people, people of color, LGBTQ, the disabled. We have not even begun to see how high the bar can go and how transformative the world we live in will be when all those of us who are other are given equal opportunity.
So my final question to do with this, because I think it's really important. People often hear, diversity is great because then you get different perspectives, etc. But it sounds, abstract. It sounds fabricated. But you're someone who's really thought about this passionately. Is there some really key way you can break this down for us, or give us an example and exemplify just how it really does cause that dramatic improvement in business?
Okay, sorry. So my response to that question, Cormac, no reflection on you, is going to be, oh, for fuck's sake.
Okay.
Okay. The reason I say that is because
that works.
Because no. I'm now going to explain why I say that. So the reason I say that is because there are fucking decades of studies that prove that diversity drives better business results, better outcomes, okay? Now, the problem there is that none of those facts and figures matter a tot. Rational arguments have zero impact on this issue at all, okay? The change we have to make is emotional, and let me explain what I mean by that. The reason no change is happening on diversity and inclusion is because at the top of every industry sits a closed loop of white guys talking to white guys about other white guys. Those white guys at the top of every industry, every company, are sitting very pretty. They have their enormous salaries, their gigantic bonuses, their big pools of stock options, their lavish expense accounts. Why on earth would they ever want to rock the boat? Oh, they have to talk diversity. They have to have diversity initiatives. They have to appoint chief diversity officers. They have to say the word diversity a lot, especially in public. Secretly, deep down inside, they don't want to change a thing because the system is working just fine for them as it currently is. It's like the old joke about the light bulb. How many therapists does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but the light bulb has to really want to change. And in every industry, the light bulb does not really want to change.
I think the unfortunate proof, I mean, not that you need it, but of what you're saying is that, you know, we've seen a lot of companies now after the Black Lives Matter demonstration come out and internally we're going to do presentations on why Black Lives Matter. They didn't do that before the social unrest. And I think that amply demonstrates your point, to be honest.